I've really used every fiber of my being to not talk to you about Miracle since the first second you walked out here.
Sure.
Because it's one of my favorite sports movies of all time. And the compliment that I can do my best to pay you is it's about the most popular and the most well-known sports story of the 20th century. I believe it was voted as such over and over again when this was being discussed at the turn of the century. And I'm on the edge of my seat, and I know how it's going to work out, right? It is unbelievable. When did that first cross your desk to be the director of this film, Gavin?
So I had made my first film called Tumbleweeds. It was a tiny little independent movie that I financed myself. I pretty much sold everything I owned, the rest on credit cards, and I made that. And I had a career. I went to Sundance, and we had a bidding war, and I won the Filmmakers Trophy and all that stuff. So,
congratulations.
So all that happened.
Yes.
And then I had written my next script, and then 9/11 happened, and the script I had written dealt with corrupt police officers in New York City. So that was not happening after 9/11.
Indeed.
And my agent said, what else do you have? I didn't have anything else. I was so naive. I'm like, this is what I was going to do. And I learned the lesson of I need to be moving different projects forward. And he said, just be open to reading other people's material. And I said, okay. And I got the script from Miracle. And to be totally honest, I didn't think it was very good.
Was it originally about a love story between Herb Brooks and his wife? That's a rumor I heard.
No.
Never was. Okay.
No,
All right.
No. You know, it was a historical document that had all the moments that we all know.
Good use of that word, obviously, in reference to that movie.
Yes, exactly. But what it didn't have was the connective tissue between the big moments that were based on character and emotionality and pulling back the curtain of things we don't know and things like that. So I went in and met with them, and I said, look, I'd want to rewrite the script, and also I want to, if I got the job, I said I would hire. Because when I was in the room, they said they wanted all the young actors in Hollywood to play. I'm like, I would never do that. Like, I grew up playing sports all my life. I played football in college. Like, I know athletics pretty well. And I said, I would never, you got to hire. I said, I can't teach actors to play hockey at the level I need them. I'd rather get hockey players and teach them to not act and just behave.
Sure.
And so.
Plus, that also mirrors the team itself,
exactly.
Right? Like they were not stars.
Exactly,
they were not stars.
Exactly, but they're not thinking that way.
Okay.
So for some reason, I got the job. I made my first movie was under $1 million. So now all of a sudden, I'm doing a $40 million studio film. I just approached it like it was a little movie, and we started searching for these kids. So all the players, the players from Minnesota in real life, I cast kids from Minnesota. Players from Mass. Kids from Mass.
Nice.
If you were a lefty, Jack O'Callahan, I'm not. You can't be a righty and play that. So I was made sure I was the fidelity to all of that.
Interesting.
And then, but the Herb Brooks part was casting Herb was very tricky.
Okay, so walk me through that process.
Well, the studio wanted Michael Douglas, and Michael actually looked kind of like Herb.
Sure.
So, and I'm a big fan of Michael. I think he's a wonderful actor, right? So I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm open to that. And I went and met with Michael. I met with Michael at his place, and he would not give me a straight answer on whether he would do the skating. And I said to him, look, Herb was a great hockey player, and he was also the coach of he played in 1960 on the team. He's an Olympic hockey player.
Right.
So I said, you got to be able to get on the ice and look like you can skate. And I said, we have about 6 months before I start rolling. If you skate every day, I'll get you and he would say yes, but then he would talk about his knee, and he had a body double, and we just kept swirling in this. And finally, and then I had to go back a second time to meet with him because the studio so wanted Michael. And then I remember I said to the studio, I said, I'm getting Bill Clinton. He keeps skating around the skating issue. I'm getting Bill Clinton. Sure. In any event, I said, I just really want to meet Kurt Russell.
That name came into your head.
Because once again, I played sports all my life, and I was a cinema junkie all my life. And I knew that Kurt was a baseball player.
Yes.
If you have never been in a locker room, you can smell the inauthenticity. And I knew Kurt grew up in locker rooms. He was an actor, but he was also a baseball player. His son was in Vancouver playing hockey at the time. So they let me fly up to Vancouver. Who picks me up at the airport? Kurt Russell. And that tells you everything about Kurt. He picked me up. And when I got in the car with him, the first thing he said to me was, I swear to God, he looks at me and goes, what do you think of the script? And 1,000 thoughts start flashing in. But I just, as I never got the bullshit gene, I'm just always telling, and I go, it's not very good. And he goes, we're gonna be good. Because he was marking my card. So, and then when I got to his house, I told him what I was gonna do with the script and what I was gonna change. And he had said, he goes, why do you want to do it? I said, when I was a boy, I'm sure like you, we're probably close to the same age. I remember being this close to the television screen.
Hell yeah.
Watching that game.
Hell yeah.
And I said to Kurt, I said, if I can just replicate the emotions that I had, we're going to be good. And I remember when the game was over, people in my neighborhood, pots and pans. I mean, it was chaos out there. People, it was that event that
it was
right. So, yeah,
it was. So the two scenes.
Do you remember where you were?
Of course, but I also remember, having to stay away from, because we're from the same area, 1010 Wins or 880 News, because it was on tape.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was on tape delay. Yeah. We had to stay away because we didn't want. We had to go through sports blackout.
We want to pretend it was live.
Right. So, I totally remember my house, my basement in Staten Island, watching it on the color TV in the household. I swear to God. All right, in 1980. So the two scenes from the film that obviously always leap out are the scene where Herb Brooks makes them skate in the dark, right, over and over and over again. Yeah. You had to get that right.
Yeah.
But the one is, period, end of story, is the speech to the team. How did you, research that and stick the landing on that scene, Gavin?
Well, the speech was actually in the original script that I had gotten.
The moment speech.
Yeah, the moment speech. And if I remember correctly, I think a lot of that was actually what he said. I think so, but I don't know for certain if it was 100%, but that's what I was told. And I had so many conversations with Herb.
You did?
Oh my God. I had so many conversations with Herb. I had conversations with Herb and 4 or 5 of the players. And I actually discovered it became Rashomon because everybody had their different perspective on the same event, which was liberating. But I'll tell you something interesting and beautiful about Herb. I discovered that it took him 3 months, in the script, it took him 3 months to choose a team. And I said to Herb one day, I said, Herb, why did you spend 3 months choosing the team? Because I had something else I wanted to do in my head. I said, why would you spend 3 months choosing your team? And he gave me all the answers about the politics of the IOC and all these different Olympic organizations. So he said he kind of had to bullshit. Can I say bullshit?
No, you did.
He had to he had to politic his way through it.
As you just did that line.
Yes,
okay, keep going.
He had to politic his way through it. But he said to me, he said, I had a piece of paper with the 20 kids, day one. And after 3 months, those are the 20 kids I picked.
Come on.
So he said to me. And I said, well, Herb, watching you spend 3 months in a movie is going to be really, really boring. I said, what I'd like to do, and because I really believe this in art, is you take it has to be the spirit of the truth. I said, I'm going to have you pick the team in a day. And I said, so we're going to remythologize your story. You're going to pick. I said, I could never do it if you wouldn't have done that. And I said, now in my version, you're going to piss everybody off, start ruffling feathers right out of the gate. And I go, that's a great way to start a character. And he goes, I love it. I would have done that anyway. Yes. And he was totally, and if he didn't support me, I couldn't have done it, but he was totally down with it. And I said, we're remythologizing. He said, it's fine. It's what I would have done. And so that's what I did.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. How many takes for the speech with Kurt Russell?
Not a lot. You know what Kurt Russell is, he could have made my life so difficult. I'm a newbie, never made a studio film. He's a big movie star. He was so generous to me and so supportive. And I was obsessed. I was feeding him interviews with Herb Brooks so he can get it right and get it right in the clothes and all that stuff. Kurt nailed it. I mean, he's such a pro. I mean, probably maybe 2 or 3 takes. That's it.
Can't get enough of that scene, man.
Yeah.
Seriously. Cannot get enough of that scene. Catch the Rich Eisen Show live weekdays from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern on Roku Sports Channel in the U.S.